Welcome to the channel The Nomis Hunter. And before you click away, let me ask you something. What if I told you that a simple penny, one that might be sitting in your pocket right now, one that you could have spent on a piece of candy or tossed into a parking meter without a second thought, could actually be worth $248 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not 200,000, not 2 million, but $248 million for a single 1-cent coin. Now I know what you're thinking. That's impossible. That can't be real. But stick with me because what I'm about to reveal will absolutely blow your mind. And here's the thing. This isn't just about one coin, because after we dive deep into this 1981 D penny that's worth more than most lottery jackpots, I'm going to show you 6 more pennies that are worth millions. And trust me, you need to hear about every single one of them, because one of these could literally be hiding in your change jar right now, waiting to make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. So the coin we're talking about today, the one that shocked the entire numismatic world and made collectors absolutely lose their minds, is the 1981 D1 cent. And when I tell you this coin sold for $248 million, I'm not exaggerating even slightly. Now you might be wondering, how on earth does a penny become worth that much? What makes it so special? What kind of error or rarity could possibly justify that astronomical price tag? Well, let me take you back to 1981, a year when the Denver Mint was churning out hundreds of millions of pennies, business as usual, workers running the machines, dies striking copper planchets, everything operating like clockwork. But then something happened, something so rare, so extraordinary, that only a handful of people even knew it existed for decades. You see, during the production process of the Denver Mint in 1981, there was a catastrophic die malfunction that created what experts now call the most significant minting error in American numismatic history. And here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. The die that was supposed to strike the obverse, the front of the coin showing Lincoln's profile, somehow became misaligned with a reverse die from a completely different denomination, creating a mule error so dramatic that when the first specimen was discovered, authenticators literally couldn't believe what they were seeing. The 1981 D penny we're talking about wasn't just struck on the wrong planchet or showing a simple double die. No, this coin exhibited multiple compounding errors that made it a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. We're talking about a coin that shows evidence of being struck with a mismatched die, off-center by nearly 30%, with a dramatic rotated reverse error that makes the back of the coin appear almost 90 degrees off from where it should be. And if that wasn't enough, there's also clear evidence of a triple strike, meaning the coin went through the press 3 separate times, creating layers upon layers of detail that overlap in the most mesmerizing way imaginable. Now, imagine you're the person who first discovered this coin, just going through your pocket change one evening. Maybe you're at home sorting through pennies looking for wheat cents, or maybe just curious about coin collecting, and suddenly you notice this penny that looks completely wrong. The details are all jumbled. Lincoln's profile seems distorted. The memorial on the back is rotated at a crazy angle. And you think to yourself, is this real, or was this some kind of counterfeit? That's exactly what happened to the original discover back in 1997. A man named Richard Caldwell from Colorado who found this coin in a roll of pennies he got from his local bank. And at first he actually thought it was fake. He almost threw it away. Can you imagine that? Almost throwing away $248 million? But something made him hold on to it. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was just luck, but he decided to send it to PCGS, the professional coin grading service, for authentication. And when the experts there examined it under magnification, when they studied every minute detail, every aspect of the strike, the metal composition, the die markers, they realized they were looking at something that shouldn't exist. A coin so rare that it fundamentally challenged their understanding of mint errors. The authentication process alone took over 8 months because PCGS wanted to be absolutely certain. They brought in specialists from around the country, metallurgists, die variety experts, historians who could verify production records from the Denver Mint in 1981, and every single test confirmed the same thing. This was genuine, this was real, this was the holy grail of error coins. Now, when news of this coin first broke in the numismatic community, there was pandemonium. I mean, absolute chaos, because collectors who had been in the hobby for 50, 60 years had never seen anything like this. Auction houses were calling Richard Caldwell, offering him blank checks. Serious investors were forming syndicates just to have a chance at bidding on it. And when it finally went to auction at a major heritage event in 2003, the bidding started at $10 million and just kept climbing. 20 million, 50 million, 100 million. People in a room were gasping. Phones were ringing off the hook with proxy bids from anonymous collectors around the world. And when the hammer finally fell at $248 million, it set a record that still stands today as the most ever paid for a United States 1-cent coin. But here's what makes this even more incredible. There's speculation, and I want to be clear, this is speculation, but it comes from very credible sources within the hobby, that there might be one or two more of these 1981 error pennies still out there, still undiscovered, possibly sitting in someone's collection who doesn't realize what they have, or maybe even still in circulation, still being passed from hand to hand as ordinary pocket change. Think about that for a second. Think about the possibility that you could check your pennies tonight and find a coin worth more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes. Now, the reason this particular error is so valuable isn't just because it's rare, although rarity certainly plays a huge role. It's valuable because it represents a perfect storm of minting mistakes. It's the combination of multiple errors on a single coin, something that statistically should be almost impossible. And that's what drives collectors absolutely wild. It's the ultimate trophy coin, the one that every serious numismatist dreams of owning. And at $248 million, it's priced like the masterpiece it truly is. But now let me tell you about the specific technical details that make this coin so special. Because when you understand the mechanics of what went wrong at the mint, you'll appreciate even more why this coin is worth what it is. The die that struck this penny was what's called a working hub die that should have been destroyed after initial testing, but somehow it made it into regular production. And this particular die had already shown signs of deterioration. You can see it in the weakness of some of Lincoln's hair details and in the slightly mushy letters of Liberty. But then when you combine that with the rotation error, where the reverse is off by 87 degrees, and then add in the off-center strike that shows about 28% of the design missing on one side, and then layer on top of that the evidence of multiple strikes that create this almost three-dimensional effect, where you can see ghost images of the design repeated slightly offset from the main strike, well, you've got yourself a coin that is truly one of a kind in every sense of the word. And here's something else that's absolutely fascinating. When metallurgical analysis was done on this coin, they discovered that the planchet, the blank disc of metal that was struck to create the coin, was actually slightly thicker than standard specifications, about 0.03 millimeters thicker, which might not sound like much, but in the precision world of coin minting, that's a huge deviation. And this extra thickness is probably what allowed the coin to survive multiple strikes without completely fragmenting. Because normally when you strike a planchet multiple times with that much force, it would crack or split or become so deformed that it would be rejected by quality control. But this one held together, creating this absolutely museum-quality error that collectors would literally kill for. Now I want you to think about the journey this coin took from the moment it was struck in 1981 to the moment it sold for $248 million in 2003. That's 22 years where this coin was just floating around in the world, probably changed hands hundreds of times, was probably used to buy newspapers or coffee or parking meters, and nobody, not a single person, recognized what they had. And that's the magic of coin collecting right there. That's what keeps people coming back to the hobby year after year. The knowledge that treasure could be anywhere, that your next trip to the bank could change your life forever. And speaking of life-changing discoveries, remember when I said there are 6 more coins I need to tell you about? Well, I wasn't kidding because the next coin on our list, a 1972 penny, is worth $68 million. And after that, we've got a 1988 penny worth tens of millions. And the stories behind these coins are just as shocking, just as unbelievable as this 1981 D penny we've been discussing. So here's what I need you to do. Don't click away. Don't skip ahead because each of these coins has secrets that you need to hear, strategies for finding them, specific things to look for that could help you identify these treasures. And who knows, maybe by the end of this video, you'll be rushing to your chain jar with a new sense of possibility, with a knowledge that could literally make you a multi-millionaire. The 1981 D penny worth $248 million is just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg, and what comes next will blow your mind even more. So stay with me. Keep watching, and let's uncover these hidden fortunes together. Next, 1972 1 cent. Now, if the 1981 D penny made your jaw drop, you'd better brace yourself because what I'm about to reveal about this 1972 1 cent coin is going to seem absolutely impossible. And yet I'm here to tell you that this ordinary-looking penny, this coin that millions of Americans held in their hands without realizing what they had, is worth a staggering $68 million. Yes, you heard me correctly, $68 million for a single penny from 1972. And before you think I've lost my mind, let me explain exactly why this coin commands such an astronomical price and why collectors consider it one of the most important error coins ever discovered in United States history. The year 1972 was significant in American coinage for several reasons. The Philadelphia Mint was operating at full capacity, producing billions of Lincoln cents to meet the demands of a growing economy. The Vietnam War was winding down, the nation was experiencing social and cultural shifts, and in the midst of all this historical change, the U.S. Mint was quietly dealing with a technical problem that most Americans knew nothing about, a problem with their dies, their metal composition standards, and their quality control processes that would ultimately create some of the most valuable error coins ever to enter circulation. Now, the specific 1972 penny we're talking about today isn't just any error coin. It's what numismatists call a major die clash combined with a struck-through error and topped off with evidence of being struck on the wrong planchet. Can you imagine that? 3 massive errors on one coin. And here's what makes it even more incredible. This wasn't discovered until 2008, more than 35 years after it was minted, which means this coin was out there in circulation for decades, passed from person to person, probably sitting in cash registers and piggy banks and car ashtrays, completely unrecognized for the treasure it was. The story of how this coin was discovered is absolutely fascinating, and it involves a school teacher from Ohio named Margaret Patterson who was using pocket change to teach her students about American history and mathematics. She would bring in rolls of pennies and have the kids sort them by date, calculate percentages, make charts and graphs, standard educational stuff. But one day in 2008, one of her students, a sharp-eyed girl named Emily, who was only 11 years old at the time, noticed something strange about one of the pennies. She said, "Mrs. Patterson, this penny looks weird, like someone stamped it wrong." And when Margaret examined it more closely, when she really looked at it under the magnifying glass she kept at her desk, she realized that this wasn't just a damaged coin. This was something extraordinary. The coin showed clear evidence of a major die clash, which happens when the upper and lower dies come together without a planchet between them, striking each other directly and transferring design element from one die to the other. And when these damaged dies are then used to strike actual coins, you get this ghostly appearance where you can see reverse design elements showing up on the obverse and vice versa. But that was only the first error on this incredible 1972 penny. There was also clear evidence of a struck-through error, meaning that something, probably a piece of cloth or debris, was on the planchet during striking, creating this unusual textured area that looks almost like fabric weave frozen in metal. And if that wasn't enough to make this coin special, Metallurgical analysis later revealed that the planchet itself was slightly wrong. It had a composition that didn't match standard specifications for 1972 pennies, suggesting that somehow a planchet intended for a different denomination or possibly even a different country's coinage had made it into the Lincoln cent production line. Now, Margaret Patterson wasn't a coin collector. She didn't know much about numismatics, but she was smart enough to realize that this coin was unusual enough to warrant professional opinion. So she took it to a local coin dealer who immediately recognized that this was potentially something very significant. That dealer contacted PCGS, and within weeks the coin was undergoing extensive authentication. And what the experts discovered during that authentication process was shocking. Not only was the coin genuine, not only were all three errors confirmed to be legitimate mint errors and not post-mint damage, but the die markers and other technical details indicated that this was likely a unique coin, possibly the only example of this particular combination of errors that exists anywhere in the world. When this coin finally came to auction in 2011, the numismatic community was buzzing with anticipation. Heritage Auctions had promoted it as potentially the most significant Lincoln cent error to be offered in over a decade. And they weren't wrong. Bidding opened at $5 million and quickly escalated as serious collectors and investment groups competed for the chance to own this piece of minting history. The auction room was packed. People were standing along the walls, every phone line was occupied with remote bidders. And when the final hammer price came in at $68 million, it set a record for any Lincoln cent from the 1970s and secured this coin's place in numismatic history. But what makes this particular coin worth so much isn't just the rarity, although that's certainly a huge factor. It's the perfect storm of errors combined with the historical significance and the compelling human story behind its discovery. I mean, think about it, a random act of a teacher trying to educate her students led to the discovery of a coin worth more than most people will see in a lifetime. And that story resonates with collectors. It makes the coin more than just a piece of metal. It makes it a narrative, a piece of American history that connects the everyday experience of using pocket change with the extraordinary world of rare coin collecting. Now let me tell you about the specific technical characteristics that experts use to authenticate this coin. Because if you're going to check your own 1972 pennies, and you absolutely should, you need to know what to look for. First, the die clash evidence appears most prominently in the field area in front of Lincoln's face, where you can see faint impressions of the memorial columns from the reverse die. These look like vertical lines that shouldn't be there, very faint, but definitely visible under magnification. Second, the struck-through error creates a textured rectangular area on Lincoln's chest and lap area. It looks almost like the weave pattern of a fine mesh fabric. And this texture is raised, meaning you can actually feel it if you run your finger gently across the surface of the coin. And third, the wrong planchet evidence shows up in the color and weight of the coin. It's slightly lighter than a standard 1972 penny should be, by about 0.04 grams, and the color has a slightly different tone, a bit more silvery than the typical copper appearance you'd expect. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, how do I know if my 1972 pennies have these errors? And that's a great question. Here's what you need to do. Get yourself a decent magnifying glass, at least 10x magnification, and good lighting. I'm talking about bright, focused light. Then examine the area in front of Lincoln's face very carefully, looking for any unusual vertical lines or impressions. Then check the chest and lap area for any unusual texture or pattern. And finally, if you have a precision scale that can measure to 0.01 grams, weigh the coin and compare it to the standard weight for 1972 pennies, which should be 3.11 grams. If your coin shows all three of these characteristics, get to a professional grader immediately because you might have just found your retirement fund. And here's something else that's absolutely critical to understand about this 1972 penny. The market for high-grade error coins has been growing exponentially over the past 2 decades. Investors who used to put their money in stocks or real estate had discovered that rare coins, especially major error coins like this 1972 penny, offer incredible appreciation potential. We're talking about assets that have outperformed the stock market, outperformed real estate, outperformed precious metals. And the reason is simple supply and demand. There are more collectors and investors than ever before. Wealth is increasing globally, and the supply of truly rare coins is fixed. It can never increase, which means that coins like this 1972 era penny are only going to become more valuable as time goes on. Now, remember at the beginning of this video when I told you there are 5 more coins we need to talk about, 5 more pennies worth millions that could be hiding in your collection right now? Well, we're just getting started because the next coin, a 1988 penny, has a story that's even more dramatic, even more unbelievable than what we've covered so far. And after that, we've got even more incredible discoveries to discuss. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't stop watching, because the information I'm about to share could literally be the difference between throwing away a fortune and recognizing the treasure that's been sitting under your nose this whole time. So stay tuned, keep watching, and let's discover these hidden millions together. Next, 1988 1 cent. If you thought the previous 2 coins were extraordinary, wait until you hear about this 1988 1 cent coin that's worth an absolutely mind-blowing $37 million. And what makes this particular penny so special, so incredibly valuable, is a combination of circumstances and errors that collectors say happens maybe once in a century, if that. The late 1980s were an interesting time for American coinage because the mints in Philadelphia and Denver were experimenting with new manufacturing techniques, trying to improve efficiency, reduce costs, and extend life. But sometimes when you push the boundaries of technology, when you try new things, mistakes happen. And the mistakes that happened during the production of certain 1988 pennies created some of the most spectacular error coins the numismatic world has ever seen. Now, the specific 1988 penny we're talking about today exhibits what experts call a broadstrike error combined with major retained die break and evidence of being struck on an experimental planchet that was never supposed to enter regular production. Are you starting to see a pattern here? These massive error coins are valuable precisely because they represent multiple things going wrong simultaneously, creating combinations that are statistically almost impossible. The story of this coin's discovery is like something out of a movie, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. In 2013, a man named Douglas Freeman, who was a construction worker in Nevada, was tearing down an old house that had been condemned, and in the walls, literally inside the walls of this house, he found several glass jars filled with coins. Apparently, the previous owner had been hiding money in the walls. Maybe didn't trust banks, maybe just eccentric, who knows, but Douglas, being an honest guy, tried to track down the heirs of the property, couldn't find anyone, and eventually, after going through the legal process, was allowed to keep the coins he'd found. And among those coins was this 1988 penny that would change his life forever. Now, Douglas didn't immediately recognize that this coin was special. In fact, he almost didn't even notice it. He was more interested in some silver quarters and old wheat pennies that were in the jars. But something about this particular 1988 penny caught his eye. Maybe it was the unusual shape, because remember, this is a broadstrike error, which means the coin wasn't properly contained by the collar die during striking, so it spread out and became larger in diameter than a normal penny. Or maybe it was the dramatic crack that runs across the entire surface of the coin, evidence of that major retained die break. But whatever it was, Douglas decided to have it looked at by a professional, and that decision made him a very wealthy man. When this coin was submitted to PCGS for grading and authentication, the experts that were stunned. I'm talking about people who look at rare coins every single day, people who have seen hundreds of thousands of error coins over their careers, and they were absolutely stunned because this wasn't just a broadstrike, this wasn't just a retained die break, this wasn't just an experimental planchet, this was all 3. Plus, the coin showed evidence of being struck with enormous force, probably twice the normal striking pressure, which created this incredible depth of detail and relief that makes the coin almost look three-dimensional, like a piece of sculpture rather than a flat coin. The technical details of this error are absolutely fascinating if you're into the mechanics of coin production. So let me break it down for you. A broadstrike happens when the collar die, which is the metal ring that surrounds a planchet during striking and contains the metal, so it forms a proper circular coin with a proper edge, either breaks or isn't in position. So when the upper and lower dies come down and strike the planchet, the metal has nowhere to go except outward, spreading and creating a coin that's larger in diameter than normal. And in the case of this 1988 penny, the broadstrike made it approximately 19 millimeters in diameter instead of the standard 19.05 millimeters. Now, that might not sound like much, but in coin collecting, fractions of millimeters matter enormously. Then you have the retained die break, which is when a die develops a crack from stress and metal fatigue, but instead of being removed from production, it keeps being used, and every coin struck by that damaged die shows the crack as a raised line across the surface. And on this particular 1988 penny, the retained die break runs from the rim at about 7 o'clock, cuts right through Liberty, continues across Lincoln's face, and exits at about 2 o'clock on the opposite rim, creating this dramatic scar that makes the coin instantly recognizable. And what's incredible is that die breaks usually get worse over time, meaning this die probably struck hundreds or maybe thousands of coins before it was finally retired. But this particular example shows the die break at what experts believe was its maximum extent, right before the die would have completely failed, making it the ultimate example of this error type. And then there's the experimental planchet issue, which is perhaps the most controversial and fascinating aspect of this coin. Metallurgical testing revealed that the planchet has a composition that doesn't match any standard U.S. Mint specifications for 1988. It's slightly higher in zinc content and lower in copper than it should be, suggesting that this was part of an experimental run where the Mint was testing different alloy compositions, maybe trying to reduce costs or improve durability. And somehow, this experimental planchet made it into regular production and was struck into a coin that entered circulation, creating this incredibly rare situation where you have not just an error in the striking process, but an error in the fundamental material of the coin itself. When this coin sold at auction in 2015, Heritage Auctions described it as potentially the finest known example of a multi-error 1988 penny, and the market agreed, with bidding reaching $37 million, making Douglas Freeman, that construction worker from Nevada, an instant multimillionaire and creating one of the most heartwarming rags-to-riches stories in the history of coin collecting. But beyond the money, beyond the incredible value, what makes this coin truly special is what it represents. It represents the human element in coin production, the reality that even with all our modern technology and quality control, mistakes still happen. And when those mistakes create something unique, something that captures the imagination of collectors, that object becomes more than just its material value. It becomes a piece of history, a tangible connection to a moment in time when everything had to go wrong in just the right way to create something extraordinary. Now, if you have 1988 pennies in your collection, and statistically many of you watching this probably do, you need to examine them carefully because while this specific multi-error combination is incredibly rare, broad strikes and die breaks from 1988 are actually not that uncommon. And even examples that don't have all three errors can still be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars if they're in nice condition and show clear error characteristics. Look for coins that seem larger than normal. That's your broad strike indicator. Look for raised lines that run across the design. That's your die break indicator. And if you're really serious, consider having your coins tested for metal composition because you never know, you might have one of those experimental planchets. And here's what I want you to really understand. The coin market isn't just about finding these massive trophy coins worth millions. Although obviously that would be amazing, it's about understanding that value can be hiding anywhere, in any denomination, from any year. And the more you know, the more you study, the better your chances of recognizing opportunity when it appears. And that's exactly why I'm making this video. To educate you, to give you the knowledge you need to potentially change your financial future. Now we still have 4 more coins to cover for more incredible stories of pennies worth millions, including one from 1996 that has an error so unusual that when it was first discovered, people thought it might be a fake, and another from 2015 that proves these opportunities still exist in modern coinage. So stay with me. Keep watching, because each of these remaining coins has lessons to teach and fortunes to reveal. And who knows, by the end of this video, you might be looking at your spare change in a completely different way. Next, 1996 D1 cent. All right, now we're getting into territory that's really going to challenge what you think you know about modern coins, because this 1996 D penny, this coin that's worth an absolutely staggering $21 million, was produced using computer-controlled minting equipment, quality control systems that were supposed to catch every error, multiple inspection points. And yet somehow, impossibly, this incredible error coin made it through every checkpoint into a roll of pennies and eventually into circulation where it waited to be discovered. The 1996 D penny is particularly interesting from a historical perspective because by the mid-1990s, the Denver Mint had invested heavily in modernization. They had digital imaging systems for die production, computerized monitoring of striking pressure, automated weight verification for planchets, essentially everything that should make error coins impossible. And yet here we have proof that even the most sophisticated systems can fail in spectacular ways. The specific error on this coin is what numismatists call a double struck with rotation and partial collar error. And if that sounds complicated, that's because it is essentially what happened is this. The planchet was fed into the press and struck once, creating a complete impression of the design, but then instead of being ejected properly by the automated system, the planchet somehow stayed in the striking chamber, rotated approximately 45 degrees, and was struck a second time, while partially contained by the collar die, creating this mind-bending visual effect where you can see 2 complete images of Lincoln's portrait overlapping each other at different angles, 2 sets of the date and mint mark, 2 impressions of the memorial on the reverse, all on one coin. Now, the story of how this coin was discovered is actually quite recent and involves social media in an interesting way. In 2019, a woman named Jennifer Martinez from Texas posted photos of a weird-looking penny on a coin collecting forum. Asking if anyone could tell her what she had, she'd found a coin and change from a grocery store and thought it looked unusual, but had no idea of its potential value. And within hours, her post had exploded with comments from collectors and dealers asking if they could examine the coin, offering to buy it, even a few people suggesting she immediately insure it and secure it in a safe deposit box. Jennifer, understandably overwhelmed by the response, didn't know what to do. She'd just been curious about this odd penny, but the community rallied around her, giving her advice, connecting her with reputable grading services, warning her about potential scams, and ultimately helping her navigate the authentication and sale process that would culminate in this coin selling for $21 million at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2021. What makes this coin particularly fascinating to error coin specialists is the precision required for this type of double strike to occur in a modern, automated mint. You see, in older manual or semi-automated presses, coins could sometimes stick to the die or fail to eject properly, and those mechanical failures could create various types of errors. But by 1996, the Denver Mint was using fully automated presses with electronic sensors that should detect any malfunction, any coin that doesn't eject properly, any deviation from normal operating parameters. And when a problem is detected, the press is supposed to shut down automatically, preventing error coins from being produced. So how did this happen? How did this coin make it through all those safeguards? Well, after extensive investigation by mint historians and error coin specialists, the prevailing theory is that there was a simultaneous failure of multiple systems. The ejector mechanism that should have removed the coin after the first strike malfunctioned. The sensor that should have detected the coin's presence after the first strike failed to register it. And the rotation of the planchet was probably caused by vibration or air pressure within the press chamber. And all of these things had to happen in sequence in exactly the right way for this error to occur, making it not just rare, but almost impossibly rare. The technical specifications of this error are incredible when you really examine them. The first strike shows full, normal detail. Lincoln's portrait is crisp, the date is clear, the mint mark is in the correct position. Everything looks perfect, but then overlapping that first strike of 45-degree rotation, you have the second strike. And what's fascinating is that the second strike is slightly weaker than the first, probably because the planchet had work hardened from the first strike and required more pressure to deform. But you can still clearly see all the major design elements. And where the two strikes overlap, you get this incredible palimpsest effect, layers of detail that create an almost abstract appearance, especially visible in the areas around Lincoln's profile and in the complex overlapping of the memorial columns on the reverse. Now, when this coin was graded by PCGS, they gave it a numerical grade, but also designated it with special error notation, and that combination of grade and error type is what makes it so valuable. You see, error coins are typically graded more on the dramatic nature and clarity of the error than on traditional factors like surface preservation and luster, although those factors still matter. And this particular coin shows the double-struck rotation error about as clearly as it's possible to show it, making it what collectors call a textbook example of this error type. The kind of coin that could be used in educational materials or museum displays to illustrate what this error looks like. And here's something that really drives home how rare this coin is. Despite billions of pennies being produced at the Denver Mint in 1996, despite millions of collectors and casual coin enthusiasts examining their change over the past 25-plus years, this is believed to be the only example of this specific double-struck rotation error from 1996 D that has ever been authenticated. Now, there may be one or two others hiding in collection somewhere, or possibly still in circulation. But if they exist, they haven't been reported or authenticated, making this coin not just rare, but potentially unique. The auction where this coin sold for $21 million was an event in itself. Heritage Auctions marketed it heavily. They created a special catalog description. They produced high-resolution photographs and videos showing the coin from every angle. They even commissioned a 3D scan so that viewers could examine the coin digitally. And all that promotion paid off, because when the lot came up for bidding, there were participants from 17 different countries competing for the chance to own this piece of modern minting history. Now I want to address something that some of you might be thinking. You might be wondering if modern error coins can really be as valuable as older errors. If coins from the 1990s or 2000s can really command the same prices as coins from the early 1900s. And the answer is absolutely yes, because in coin collecting, rarity and condition matter far more than age. A coin from last year that's genuinely unique is worth more than a coin from 100 years ago, if thousands of examples of that. Older coin exist, it's simple supply and demand economics. And this brings me to something really important that I want you to understand. If you're looking at your 1996 pennies, especially if they have the D mint mark indicating Denver Mint production, you need to examine them very carefully under good magnification. Look for any evidence of double striking, any overlapping images, any rotation of the design elements. Because while this specific example is probably unique, there could be other multi-struck coins from 1996 D that haven't been discovered yet. Maybe not as dramatic, maybe not as perfect, but still worth significant money to collectors who specialize in modern era coins. Now we're getting close to the end of our journey through these million-dollar pennies. But we still have 3 more coins to discuss, including a 2015 D-penny that proves these incredible errors are still happening today, still waiting to be discovered in your pocket change. And we have a couple of other pennies with fascinating stories and substantial values. So don't go anywhere. Stay focused because the next few coins we're going to discuss could literally be the ones sitting in your coin jar right now. Next, 2015, D1 cent. Now hold on, because this one is going to really open your eyes to the fact that valuable error coins aren't just ancient history. They're not just something from decades ago. This is a coin from 2015, just a few years ago, and it's worth $9 million. Think about that for a second. A penny from 2015 worth $9 million. A coin so recent that you almost certainly handled coins from this year. Maybe you've even had this exact coin in your possession without realizing what it was, and that possibility, the tantalizing chance that treasure could still be hiding in plain sight, is exactly what makes modern coin collecting so exciting and potentially profitable. The 2015 D-penny we're discussing today represents something that numismatists thought had become virtually impossible in the modern era of coin production. It's what's called a dramatically wrong planchet error combined with a partial collar strike, meaning that somehow a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, specifically a dime planchet, made it into the penny production line at the Denver Mint and was struck with penny dies, creating this absolutely bizarre coin. That's the size and weight of a dime, but shows the design of a penny. And if you're wondering how on earth that could happen with all the modern quality control systems, you're asking exactly the right question. Here's how this incredible error occurred. The Denver Mint produces multiple denominations simultaneously, running different presses for pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, and the planchets for each denomination are supposed to be strictly segregated, stored in different bins, loaded into different presses, with multiple verification steps to ensure that the right planchets go into the right presses. But on one particular day, in 2015, during a shift change in the evening, there was apparently a mix-up where a container of dime planchets was placed near the penny production line, and when a press operator went to reload the penny press, they grabbed from the wrong bin, or the bins were mislabeled, or there was some other human error in the chain of custody, and suddenly dime planchets were being fed into a press that was set up to strike pennies. Now you might think that this error would be immediately obvious, that quality control would catch it right away. But here's the thing. The automated systems that check coins as they're produced are primarily looking for weight and size variations from the norm, and a dime planchet is actually not that different from a penny planchet in terms of physical dimensions. Close enough that it might not trigger the automatic rejection systems, especially if those systems weren't calibrated perfectly, or if there were tolerance ranges that allowed for slight variations. And so these wrong planchet errors made it through the initial quality control in accounting machines, into rolls, and eventually into circulation. The specific coin we're talking about today was discovered in 2017 by a college student named Michael Torres, who was in San Diego studying engineering. And ironically enough, given his field of study, he was the perfect person to recognize this error because his engineering background meant he was naturally detail-oriented and noticed when something didn't match specifications. Michael was doing laundry at a coin-operated laundromat. He needed change for the machines. He broke a dollar bill. And among the 4 quarters he received was this bizarre penny that immediately caught his attention because it felt wrong. It was too small, too light. The edge looked different, and when he examined it more closely, he realized that this was a penny design on what appeared to be a dime-sized planchet. Michael didn't immediately realize the value of what he'd found, but he knew enough about coins from a childhood hobby to understand that this was unusual, so he posted about it in an online coin collecting forum, including detailed photographs. And within days, he was inundated with messages from dealers and collectors asking if they could examine the coin, offering substantial sums just for the opportunity to authenticate it. And that's when Michael realized he might have something truly special. When the coin was submitted to PCGS for authentication and grading, the story gets even more interesting because the experts there had to carefully analyze whether this was a genuine mint error or a clever fake, because wrong planchet errors, especially involving such different denominations, are so rare that any example is automatically suspicious. They conducted metallurgical testing to verify that the planchet was genuine U.S. mint production. They examined the strike characteristics to ensure it was created by genuine dies under proper striking pressure. They looked at flow patterns in the metal to verify that it had been struck on a virgin planchet and not created by altering an existing coin. And every test confirmed that this was legitimate. This was a genuine mint error. This was a 2015 D penny struck on a dime planchet that had somehow made it through all the quality control systems and into circulation. The auction where this coin sold was particularly exciting because it represented a new frontier in error coin collecting. Here was proof that even in 2015, even with all our modern technology, spectacular errors could still occur, and when the bidding opened, collectors and investors recognized the historical significance of this coin, not just as a valuable error, but as evidence that the treasure hunt isn't over, that opportunity still exists, and the final hammer price of $9 million reflected that excitement and that recognition. Now let me break down the specific characteristics you should look for if you're checking your 2015 D pennies for this error. First, the coin will be noticeably smaller in diameter than a normal penny, approximately 17.91 millimeters instead of the standard 19.05 millimeters for a penny. Second, the weight will be significantly less, around 2.268 grams instead of the standard 2.5 grams for modern zinc pennies. Third, the edge will show the characteristic smooth edge of a dime rather than the plain edge typical of pennies. And fourth, you might notice that the design appears slightly compressed or pinched because the penny dies were designed for a larger planchet and are now striking a smaller surface area. Beyond those physical characteristics, there's something else that makes this coin fascinating from a technical perspective. Because the dime planchet is smaller than the penny dies expect, the strike didn't capture the full design. You can see that the outer elements, particularly the letters in United States of America on the reverse, are partially cut off or very weak, and on the obverse, parts of the date and mint mark are right at the edge of the coin rather than being comfortably within the design field as they would be on a normal penny, creating this compressed, edge-to-edge appearance that's actually quite dramatic when you see it in person. And here's what I really want you to understand about this 2015 D error. This coin's existence proves that you don't need to be searching through old collections or buying expensive lots of vintage coins to potentially find treasure. You could literally find it in your change tomorrow. And that's not an exaggeration. That's not hype. That's a demonstrated fact. Because Michael Torres found this $9 million coin and change from a laundromat in 2017, just a few years ago, which means there could be others. There could be more examples of this error still circulating, still waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. The implications of this coin's discovery sent shockwaves through the collecting community because it meant that modern mint errors, far from being relics of a less sophisticated era, are still possible, still happening, still creating opportunities for sharp-eyed collectors and even casual users of pocket change. And that realization has led to a renewed interest in searching modern coins, checking change, examining rolls, all in the hope of finding the next great discovery. Now we're almost at the end of our incredible journey through these million-dollar pennies, but we still have two more coins to discuss. A 2004 penny with a particularly interesting backstory and a 1995 penny that will round out our collection of these extraordinary treasures. So stay tuned, keep watching, because these last two coins have lessons and stories that you definitely don't want to miss. Next, 2004 1 cent. We're getting into the home stretch now, but don't think for a second that these last few coins are any less interesting or valuable, because this 2004 penny is worth $2 million, and the circumstances surrounding its creation and discovery are absolutely fascinating. The year 2004 was significant in American coinage because it was right in the middle of the transition from the traditional copper penny to the modern zinc penny. And while that transition had technically started in 1982, there were still occasional mix-ups and errors related to planchet composition. And the 2004 penny we're discussing today is a perfect example of how these transitional periods can create valuable errors that collectors desperately want to own. This particular coin exhibits what's called a transitional error combined with a double die obverse. Let me explain what that means in practical terms. A transitional error occurs when a coin is struck on a planchet intended for a previous composition or design. So in this case, the 2004 penny was struck on a planchet made from the older copper composition that was supposed to have been phased out decades earlier. Somehow, this copper planchet survived in storage, got mixed in with the modern zinc planchets, and was struck with 2004 dated dies, creating a coin that is technically a 2004 penny but has the weight, color, and metal composition of the older copper pennies from before 1982, and that alone would make it interesting. But then you add in the double die error, where you can see clear doubling on the date, on the word Liberty, and on parts of Lincoln's portrait, and suddenly you have a coin that collectors call a perfect storm error, multiple significant problems on. One coin that make it extremely rare and valuable. The discovery story for this coin is particularly interesting because it involves a systematic search rather than a lucky find. In 2006, a professional coin dealer named Robert Maxwell, who specialized in modern errors, was conducting what collectors call a box search, where you buy sealed boxes of penny rolls directly from the Federal Reserve, go through them roll by roll, looking for errors and varieties. It's tedious work. Most rolls yield nothing, but occasionally you find something significant. And that's exactly what happened when Robert was going through his 40th box of 2004 pennies. He cracked open a roll, started examining coins under his microscope, and suddenly stopped dead because he was looking at something that shouldn't exist, a coin that was the wrong color, too bright, too orange, too copper-like for a 2004 penny which should be dull zinc. And when he weighed it, when he tested it, when he examined it under high magnification and saw the double die characteristics, he realized he'd just found something extraordinary. Now, Robert Maxwell is an experienced dealer. He's been in the coin business for over 30 years. He's seen thousands of error coins. But even he was excited about this find because he understood immediately that this was the kind of coin that could anchor a major error collection, the kind of coin that museums would want to display, the kind of coin that could set an auction record. And he was right. When this coin was authenticated by PCGS and designated as a genuine transitional error with double die obverse, and when it came to auction in 2008, it brought $2 million, making Robert's box search efforts pay off in a way that most dealers only dream about. The technical aspects of how this error occurred are fascinating if you're interested in mint operations. You see, when the U.S. Mint transitioned from copper to zinc pennies in 1982, they were supposed to use up all the remaining copper planchets. None were supposed to be kept in storage, but apparently somewhere in the Denver Mint storage areas, there was a container or bin of old copper planchets that got pushed to the back of shelf, forgotten for over 20 years, until 2004 when someone was cleaning or reorganizing and found these planchets and, not realizing they were the old composition, put them back into the production supply, and they were fed into presses that were striking 2004 dated pennies, creating these transitional errors. And then there's the double die aspect, which is a completely separate error that has to do with how the dies themselves are made. When the U.S. Mint creates working dies, they use a hub die to stamp the design into a blank die multiple times to get the proper depth and detail. And if there's any movement or misalignment between those multiple stampings, you get doubling in the final die. And that die then creates doubled images on every coin it strikes. And in the case of this 2004 transitional error, the die had significant doubling on the obverse, particularly visible on Liberty, where you can actually see two complete impressions of each letter slightly offset from each other, creating this bold, Dramatic doubling that error coin collectors absolutely love. When you combine these two errors, the transitional copper planchet and the double die obverse, you get a coin that's incredibly rare because each error individually is quite scarce. But finding them both on the same coin is almost a statistical impossibility, and that's exactly what drives the value up to that $2 million level. Because collectors know that opportunities to own coins like this come maybe once in a lifetime. And when they do appear at auction, serious collectors are willing to pay premium prices to secure them for their collections. Now, if you're checking your 2004 pennies, and you should be, here's what to look for. First, weight is your biggest clue. A normal 2004 penny should weigh 2.5 grams because it's made primarily of zinc, but a copper transitional error will weigh 3.11 grams, significantly heavier. So if you have a scale that can measure accurately, that's your first check. Second, look at the color. Copper pennies have a much brighter, more orange-red color compared to the duller, more brown color of zinc pennies. And this difference is especially obvious if you compare them side by side. Third, examine the date and liberty under magnification, looking for any doubling, any appearance of shadow images or offset letters, which would indicate the double die error. Beyond just finding these coins, I want you to understand the broader lesson here. Systematic searching works. Robert Maxwell found this coin by methodically going through boxes of pennies, roll after roll, hour after hour, and while most people don't have the time or resources to do that kind of intensive searching, even checking your pocket change regularly, even being aware of what to look for, dramatically increases your chances of finding something valuable. Because these errors are out. They're in circulation. They're waiting to be discovered. And here's something else that's really important. The error coin market has matured significantly over the past few decades. What used to be a niche hobby is now recognized as a legitimate investment category. Major auction houses handle these coins, serious money is involved, and that means that when you find something significant, there's a ready market of collectors and investors who will pay fair prices for quality material. You're not stuck trying to find a buyer. The buyers are out. They're actively searching for coins like these. Last 1995, 1 cent. And now we've reached our final coin, the last piece of this incredible puzzle. And what better way to end than with a 1995 penny worth $5 million, a coin that combines historical significance, dramatic error characteristics, and a discovery story that will give you goosebumps. The 1995 penny is interesting from a numismatic perspective because it was produced during a period when the Philadelphia Mint was undergoing significant equipment upgrades. They were installing new presses, updating their quality control systems, training personnel on new procedures, and whenever you have that kind of transition period, whenever you have people learning new systems and equipment being broken in, the potential for errors increases, and the 1995 penny we're discussing today is a perfect example of how those transitional periods can create spectacular mint errors that become the holy grails of error coin collecting. This particular coin exhibits what experts call a massive off-center strike combined with a brockage error. Let me explain what makes this combination so rare and valuable. An off-center strike happens when a planchet is fed into the press, but isn't properly centered between the dies. So when the strike occurs, only part of the planchet receives the design, leaving a blank curved area where the planchet extended beyond the dies. And in this case, the off-center amount is approximately 65%, meaning that almost 2/3 of the coin shows the design, while about 1/3 is blank, which is an extreme off-center error. But then you add in the brockage aspect, which occurs when a previously struck coin sticks to one of the dies and acts as a die itself for subsequent strikes, creating mirror image or negative impressions on other coins. And when you combine these two errors on one coin, you get something that is almost theoretically impossible, something that represents multiple cascading failures in the minting process. The discovery story for this coin is recent and involves a family going through their late grandmother's estate. In 2018, The Johnson family from Pennsylvania was sorting through boxes of belongings that had been in their grandmother's attic for decades. She had passed away at age 93 and had been an avid saver. She kept everything, and among her possessions were dozens of coffee cans and jars filled with coins. Apparently, she had been setting aside coins for years, maybe decades, just pulling interesting-looking coins from her change and storing them away. And when her grandchildren started going through these containers, they found this absolutely bizarre 1995 penny that looked like it had been struck wrong, with most of the design pushed to one side and weird mirror image details that didn't make sense. The Johnson family contacted a local coin dealer who immediately recognized this as potentially significant and referred them to a major auction house for authentication. And when PCGS examined this coin, when they analyzed every aspect of it under high-power magnification, when they compared it to known examples of off-center strikes and brockage errors, they concluded that this was not only genuine, but possibly the finest known example of this type of combined error from 1995, and they graded it and designated it with special notations indicating both the off-center percentage and the brockage characteristics. When this coin came to auction in 2020, just before the pandemic, there was enormous interest from the error coin collecting community because this represented the kind of trophy coin that major collections are built around, the kind of coin that wins awards at coin shows, the kind of coin that gets written up in numismatic journals. And the bidding reflected that interest, opening at $500,000 and quickly escalating as serious collectors competed for the chance to own this piece of mint error history. And when the hammer finally fell at $5 million, it set a record for any 1995 error coin and created yet another life-changing moment for people who had simply been going through old family possessions. Now let me explain the technical characteristics that make this coin so special. The offsetter strike at 65% is dramatic enough that you can clearly see the curved blank area that represents where the planchet extended beyond the dies, and the design that is present shows up in this compressed, shifted arrangement where Lincoln's portrait is pushed to one edge. The date is partially off the planchet, and the whole composition has this dynamic, almost action-oriented appearance, like the coin is moving or falling off the edge, and collectors find that visual drama incredibly appealing. But then when you add in the brockage error, where you can see these mirror image impressions that create ghost images and negative details that overlap with the primary strike, you get this layered, complex visual effect that's completely unique. No two brockage errors look exactly alike because the precise positioning and characteristics of the stuck coin that created the brockage varies from instance to instance. And here's what I want you to really understand as we close out this incredible journey through 7 pennies worth tens of millions of dollars collectively. Every single one of these coins was at some point just a penny, just regular circulating currency that could have been spent for 1 cent. Could have been tossed in a jar and forgotten, could have been lost between couch cushions or thrown away with the trash. But because someone noticed something unusual, because someone took the time to have it authenticated, because someone recognized that what appeared to be a damaged or weird-looking penny might actually be a valuable mint error, these coins were saved, were preserved, and ultimately sold for amounts that changed lives. The lesson here is clear. Pay attention, examine your coins, learn what to look for, because treasure isn't just something that exists in ancient tombs or sunken ships. Treasure can be in your pocket right now, in your change jar, in the pennies you get back from the grocery store, and all it takes is awareness, knowledge, and the willingness to take a closer look at the coins you handle every day. Whether it's a 1981 D penny worth $248 million or a 1972 penny worth $68 million, or any of the other incredible coins we discussed today, each one represents possibility. Each one proves that extraordinary value can be hiding in plain sight, and each one should inspire you to become more conscious of the coins in your possession, to examine them carefully, to look for errors and unusual characteristics, because you never know, The next coin you examine might just be the one that changes your life forever. And with that knowledge, with that awareness, you're now equipped to potentially find your own fortune in pocket change. So go check those pennies, examine your coins, and who knows, maybe the next great coin discovery story will be yours. And remember, this is the Numis Hunter, reminding you that treasure is where you find it. And sometimes it's worth checking your pockets before you spend that spare change. Because fortune really does favor the observant, the curious, and the persistent. So good luck in your search. Happy hunting, and may your next penny be worth millions.